Okay, members, thank you. So we're now in open session again and resuming our meeting at agenda item 5. And this is this morning a briefing from from representatives of various disabled people's organisations on the disability strategy. The briefing for this item, members, is at page 119, and I now welcome to the meeting the following representatives. So we have Tony O'Reilly from North West Forum of People with Disabilities via Zoom. Tony, are you able to hear and see us okay? Yep, an indication there from Tony, thank you. June Best from IMTAC with support from Michael Lorimer. Amanda Paul, Centre for Independent Living. David MacDonald from the Omnibus Partnership, and Dermot Devlin from My Way Access. And June, before I invite you to make an open statement, I just want to say it's a session I'm very, very much looking forward to. It's issues very, very close to my heart. First of all, activism, and I think that's the first thing to say, inclusion, and also co-production and design, and the importance and necessity of that. I do want to say I'm very proud to know many of you and to have worked with many of you on various campaigns, and I do absolutely know that we are hearing this morning from people who are experts, and not only by experience but also experts in their own right in terms of the needs and the barriers and all of those issues, and in terms of your contribution to co-production design, I think that's absolutely fundamental. So I'll go back to yourself, June, maybe a brief opening statement if you can, please, and then we'll go to members' questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you. We're all here today because we've outdone our patience. We really have. For many, many years, we have been looking for a disability strategy. And for many, many years, it hasn't been delivered. We've been let down. Our lives are difficult. Everybody's lives are difficult in this time of austerity. But we, as disabled people in Disabled People's Organisation, have really tried, have given it our all, have spent time, weekends, nights, working together to see how we can contribute our lives and the difficulties we face on a day-to-day basis, and share this with the departments and Department of Communities in particular for this occasion. We have a wealth of experience, as you've mentioned, Chair, and amongst us, and I am only going to give you a very, very quick brief here to say that in January 2021, we were asked and invited by the Department of Communities to come together to look at and inform a disability strategy with the other inclusion strategies. It wasn't a straightforward issue at all. It had lots of challenges. And I would like just to say that the DPOs, I hope you don't mind me calling them the DPOs, Disabled People's Organisations, were with the disability sector organisations and alongside the Human Rights and Equality Commission, and also Unite trade unions. So we brought the whole disability sector together, and we were to work with co-production and co-design with the departments. Now, unfortunately, at the very beginning, there was lots of tension between us all. There were misconceptions and preconceptions of what co-design and co-production meant. And for the DPOs, we were very frustrated, but we had meetings with the rest of the groups outside the department, which we facilitated as DPOs. And we facilitated these to get together to look at where we were coming, what we were doing, and above all, the priorities that we needed on a rights-based disability strategy, because we wanted this one to exceed. The last one, which took 6 years to develop, was never materialised. It was never implemented, and we don't know where it went. So that was another 6 years wasted. So we've worked tirelessly together, I've said that before, and I do repeat myself, and I better explain to those people who do not know me, I have no sight. I have plenty of vision, but I have no sight. And I'm trying to remember everything from memory, and I probably will garble, so please bear with me, bear with me. So the co-production with the department, I was selected as, for my sins, as co-chair of the co-design working group. And we were working towards this rights-based outcome from the outset. Time went on, and we had meetings and meetings and meetings, and it was very apparent that what the department considered co-production and what the DPOs and the rest of the committee were looking at as co-production and understood the principles, that it was not an equal relationship. And the department's expectations were perhaps not our expectations and our understanding. But we went on, and eventually we had a consensus view to decision-taking and decision-making, which worked well. So very quickly, through this process, we designed a rights-based strategy and our key asks, and we worked all together. We worked really well together. What has happened is, at the end, when we had a draft strategy, which we all contributed to, at the end of that strategy, unfortunately, we never saw it. We weren't given permission to see the research that had been commissioned by the department, and we did not have the other material. We were not given the opportunity to look at the other material, which actually is not part of co-production, because we should have been, we felt that we had given so much of ourselves into this so that people would really understand the issues. We did have the chance to meet cross-departmentally, and that was an invaluable situation because our lives are not compartmentalised. We have, a holistic approach to our daily lives, and we are interdependent on the services that we need. So, at the end of this process, we were selected by the whole group, the whole working group, to present our draft strategy with our position paper and our outcomes to the ministerial steering group of the executive. We knew what was in that. We also felt that it was important because we have not had sight of our work. We have never seen the draft strategy. We don't know where it is, whether it's been scrapped or whatever. But Minister of Communities, Mr. Lyons, last week, mentioned that he would be looking at the disability strategy. But we want to know, is this our disability strategy? Is this the one we worked at? Are we being asked to complete this? Is it a different strategy? And where, are we being undervalued? Are we just being a token to put this together? We really, really don't know. And I'm sorry, I'm really passionate about this. I do apologise for that. Or maybe I shouldn't apologise for that.
You don't need to apologise for that, certainly.
But the other thing that has come through with this is that despite requests, we haven't even seen the research that was commissioned. And we had research and the report from the Equality and Human Rights Commission. So we don't even know why that extra research was needed. At the end of the process, we were just literally, to use a colloquialism, dumped. And to ourselves, I'm afraid that was a slap in the face. The one thing that came out of the ministerial meeting was that there was empathy for us, that we were being totally realistic in this time of austerity. We know that everybody is vying for money, and you're bombarded with requests. But we did work tirelessly. we put all we had and all the resources we could into this. And I'm beginning to think, and this is the ironic side, I really am, and the cryptic side of me, is this, well, we just use this tokenism over 2 years? You know, what is going on? Why is this not important? Our lives are really, really suffering. I'm going to say that I haven't got another 30 years to develop a proper, implemented, effective and positive disability strategy to improve the lives of disabled people in Northern Ireland. Scotland and Wales are working on policy statements, but we haven't got this. We haven't got this. We don't know what's in that draft strategy. So there are all sorts of questions that we're here, but where is the strategy? And the one thing that came out of the Ministerial Committee meeting was the fact that we were going to be promised a regional disability forum to advise government departments. And there is also a precedent for that. I'm sitting here as Vice Chair of IMTAC, the Inclusive Mobility and Advisory Group to Government on transport issues. And we need transport for everything. We do. Everything is just tied up in this, and our lives are just continuing. Hot off the press, the report last week said from the UNCRPD report, United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, reported their written report last week, and I have to try and remember these words, clearly shows that there is still a systematic, grave human rights violations within Northern Ireland towards people with disabilities or disabled people. So I'm asking, please, can we see this strategy? Please, can we find all these questions out? Please tell us we're not, just the token disabled people. And we're not going to be added on to the end of policies. It's going to be in a holistic approach, government departments working together. And I think, Michael, have I left, excuse me asking Michael if he's got my notes. Have I left anything out? Oh, yeah.
I don't think so, June. No. You covered everything.
So with that, I would like to invite you to ask questions. We have got, as I said, experts here, and we'll try and get the right person to answer the questions. And thank you for listening.
Yep. Thank you very much, June, and very, very, very worrying messages. My first question was going to be whether you had an understanding of whether the disability strategy was aligning with the work you'd done, but I think that's already been very clearly answered, and worryingly so. I have to say, for me, co-production and that issue around co-production should, well, first of all, I don't understand why departments at times appear reluctant as if it's something they need to do. It is absolutely the essence and the best value for money and the best advice they will largely ever get. The other thing is, for me, it should never be an event. It must be a process and an ongoing part of the process. And indeed, throughout the implementation of an eventual disability strategy, it's my belief that that review process should involve that element of co-production. So I'm very disappointed that a sense has been a very clear sense has been communicated here of having taken part in the work, put your own efforts, expertise, sacrificed your own time into assisting the department in developing this strategy, to then be in the dark about what the strategy might contain at this point. And I want to say, I think fundamentally, as a basic courtesy, everyone who contributed to that work should be getting sight of it before it goes anywhere. Before it goes out of the department, even before anyone else sees, I think that's a fundamental, just in terms of your co-production of it and your ownership of it in that sense. So 2 questions from me, and then I'm going to go to members. In terms of resource allocation, was there, as part of your work on this strategy, was there discussions of the need for specific resources to be allocated to ensure effective implementation of a disability strategy, and how those resources would be managed?
We were all unpaid when we were doing this strategy, and we were totally realistic about the funding and resources that would be needed for this. We in fact were laying the foundations, and for a pathway, for pathways to be built on. But perhaps I could ask Michael, who do you think? I don't know who's beside me or around me.
And I'll watch for indications as well, so.
Thanks.
I think throughout the process, resources were talked about and the fact that we needed effective resourcing of the strategy. And I think at every stage there was pushback from the department and other departments too. But I suppose there are other things in the key asks that are not about resources too. So, but I think, for instance, things like the regional forum and the legislative changes we're looking for do require resources, but there would seem to be a reluctance at every stage.
And will themselves be a resource? Yeah. And I think that's better how we need to look at it and to frame it. The other one I wanted to check with you was during your part of this important work, was it clear what steps were being taken to incorporate the UNCRPD into legislation here? Did that form part of the work?
Tony? Tony?
Yep, okay, so Tony's coming in now, so we'll just give him a second.
Sorry.
Yep.
I'm trying. It won't let me unmute.
There you go, we can hear you.
We're hearing you now,
My
Tony.
apologies. Yes, as you'll know from committee members and chair, as you will know from the briefing paper forwarded to you by Michael Lorimer, we have asked for the incorporation of the UNCRPD as part of the strategy and the incorporation of the UNCRPD into domestic law. There has been pushback from the department on this consideration, and in fact, in the original report from the expert panel, which included Professors Eleanor Flynn and Professor Bona Byrne, they set out the original report within the framework of the UNCRPD, and within the basic principle of incorporation. And we were asked initially not to do it within a human rights incorporated framework, but the independent advisory expert panel went against that and went full on for incorporation. And indeed, it's one of the asks from the report, from the position paper that Michael has forwarded you today.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Okay, so I'm going to go now to members who have at this point Kelly, Melissa and Sean. So Kelly, go Lana right at the hull.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, June. Thank you to everyone who's come along today, and Tony online. I will say hello, friends, and I'll declare an interest. I used to be a member of MTAC many years ago, and I have thought, talked and hugged most of the people that are in this room at some point. Thank you very much for coming along today. One of my first questions was, do you have the draft and can we get a copy of it? So you've answered that one already. Could I just check, and I don't mind who answers this question, the terms and conditions of the expert panel, you guys, whenever you were getting involved with doing this work with the department, was it very clear in those terms and conditions what your role was? Did they lay out very clearly how important your role was and the fact that you would have sight of the draft strategy, if you can remember back to those initial terms and conditions?
For Tony?
Tony, yes.
So I have an indication from Tony. Go ahead, Tony.
Yes. Sorry, I should have said earlier. I was a member of the expert panel. The expert panel consisted of Professor Bona Byrne, Professor Eleanor Flynn, Sean Fitzsimons, and Tony Riley. Were brought together to develop an initial report to develop key recommendations for the development of a disability strategy, which it then followed that it was to be further developed by the co-design group. Mm-hmm. All of the members you can see here today in front of you on the panel. We had asked the expert panel, all members of the expert panel had asked that they would see the publication of both the report and the strategy before it went into the public domain. We further asked that no strategy, finalised strategy, be developed without the consent of deaf and disabled people's organisations and the wider co-design group, and that there should be further engagement with the department on this. There was initially agreement in principle that this would be done, but as June, the co-chair of the co-design group, has already advised, this hasn't been done to date.
Thank you very much.
you.
Can I just follow on from that, just to ask, co-production and co-design is a very unique and special thing that can actually make such better policy. I've heard from you today your frustrations that co-production and co-design seems to have come to a brick wall. It has stopped and all contact has ended. But can I ask, during the discussions, either with the expert panel or with the DPOs, at any stage were you guys asked if there was anything about co-production and co-design that could be improved for people with disabilities to be included in the strategy?
David?
Yes, if I recall rightly, we were, and we said there could. One of the comments that we made was that we didn't want a draft disability strategy going out with our names on it if it was changed dramatically from what we had worked on, because we didn't want our names put to something that was not what we were agreeing to. So we were very explicit with the officials, and indeed I think we spoke with the Minister on the same vein. We were well received, I have to say. The Minister received us extremely well, as did whoever else from the other ministerial departments attended. And I was one of the speakers at that group. And we were well received. It's just a shame that the thing paused at that stage. I hope it is a pause, because I think it should continue. I think a very relevant factor is June has already said that we do this free of charge, pro bono, so to speak. The department and the government benefits from having us there for nothing. And we are experts, not just in our own particular conditions. We're well geared, we're well educated, we're well experienced, and we discuss with other disabled people. We know our stuff. We are as expert as other experts are, as you stated, Mr. Chair. So they will be saving money to have this sorted. They will also be saving money because I think, as June said, our recommendations are reasonable. We're not looking things to change overnight. We never are looking things to change overnight because it's not possible. Things change gradually. But if I look back to when the DDA came in 1995, when I was involved in protests and campaigning at that stage, and I look now at what has been achieved, there were no drop curbs in 1994. There were no accessible vehicles that I could use easily in 1994. There was no little access to buildings in 1994. All of that has changed, and it's changed gradually. It's changed to some degree as things are being built. It hasn't cost a packet because it's been included in the design, as things are being changed. And that's where we need to go, and that's what we're trying to achieve.
I have one final question, Chair. I don't want to take up anybody else's time. I'm as angry as you are. I think that having worked with a lot of you and with people with disabilities for years, I don't know what the hold-up is. I also am aware that there's a budget coming forward without having a strategy in advance to inform that budget. Anecdotally, I have heard that there may be, the Minister and the Department may be planning to bring all the social strategies into one massive document. I would just ask how you would feel about that.
I would like to answer that.
Yep.
Happy enough, June.
Yes, absolutely, David.
I think there are problems if everything is combined together. Simply because things will be missed, things will not be seen. Disabled people's lives are particularly complex, in part because there's more than one disabled person. So there's a whole range of impairments that impact on people in different ways. Some people can have more than one impairment. Some people can be disabled and be poor. Some people are disabled and are women. So there is a cross match there, and I think that needs to be recorded in whatever document comes out. But I think to combine them all together completely misses what disabled people will need. I think we need to include, to some degree, one of the things that I was looking for at the time was that we meet with the other groups, and we never managed to do that. And I think we could do with doing that, certainly. I think because we do have similar problems. Ultimately, the discrimination is discrimination. It doesn't matter whether you're poor or you're a woman or you're disabled. It's discrimination. And I think from that point of view, we can look at trying to, but I think we need to keep the disability strategy separate, but include reference to the other bodies.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
I think, it's fair to say the reason why we need these different strategies is because there are particular and specific challenges and issues that need addressed. It actually almost defeats the purpose if you start to merge them. So you need a strategy on anti-poverty. You need one on disability. You need one on gender and sexual orientation. These strategies have been brought forward because they're specifically needed for specific areas. So I think that's clear enough in that sense. Melissa?
Well, Fáidir Óvalig, you're all very welcome. It's Jas Búla Levsha. It's nice meeting with you. Agus Buas behind you the Ratches, June. And thank you for your statement, June. It was very, very comprehensive in many respects. Now, unlike Kelly, I'm not a hugger. But I do know Dermot in particular from when he was a student in the Northwest College in Derry. And I've admired the way that Dermot has progressed as a champion in every respect, and on behalf of the disabled and their rights. I'm actually shocked at your statement today as well too, and I know you used the phrase dumped, and the word that was in my head at the time was that you were patronised. They've involved you in something that where they never really intended to sort of progress it much further, sort of like just giving the nod to you, and patronising is the only word that can come to mind for me in that respect. And all the more reason why I do think, and I make this just as a statement, that strategy needs to be published. It needs to be published, and that they should provide an opportunity to you and to everyone to view that document. And there's an onus on us, even as a committee, and across the Assembly and the Executive, to challenge, expose and address inequalities in every respect. And we know in particular, even too within our own council areas and that as well, is very much an issue there, all the time, steady. And I think that our committee, we should be writing to the Minister and lending our support to the request for the Disabled People's Organisation, i.e. and supporting you in any way that we can support you as well. And I wouldn't like to make that statement thinking that for 1 minute that it will end up falling on deaf ears, and that once again it's patronising. And I wouldn't want to add to that, which I think you have already been subjected to.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. I'll come back to that proposal. Sian, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Jane. My name's Sian. I'm sitting beside Kelly in the seat closest to you in our horseshoe setup. I want to thank you all for taking the time out to be here. I had questions that I had thought of before I heard from you, and to be honest, some of them seem fairly insignificant now that it's overtaken by the disappointment and anger of some of the things that you've said, particularly the use of the word token. I think that, as Melissa has outlined, to feel like your expertise is being used as a token tick box angers me more than polite words can say in a committee, shall we say. But before I had heard, I am really interested in the process of co-design and bringing those with a lived experience to the table, and how we can do that in a really meaningful, non-tokenistic way. So I'm just wondering, June, you had spoken a wee bit about the tension at the start, those misconceptions and pre-perceptions of what co-design actually meant. And I'm just wondering, is there anything, aside from the end bit, is there anything that we can learn from that process of co-design? Was there anything that did work, or things that we can take learning from when we do this again, aside from what we would change as a result and at the end part? But in those early days of the formation of this panel, is there anything that we can learn and any best practice that we can take forward?
Thank you. Can I mention just first of all, and then I'll ask some of my colleagues to send. One of the things why co-design and co-production was so important is that those preconceived ideas are sometimes miles away, and misinterpreted perceptions. And I feel that if it was open and upfront and said, look, we want from you this strategy to improve the lives of disabled people in a holistic manner. And I think that if they were upfront and saying, well, actually, we have taken the expert panel's point of view at the time, and we all started from the same hymn sheet, rather than a goal at the end of it, which we felt that the department had, and we were working towards that goal. But it's the openness, and I have to say, we as DPOs in our section, we brought, with difficulty, we had meetings without the department to come to a consensual approach and to look at things together and understand each other. And we brought the whole sector together. And that is really, really important, that people express what they, what the outcomes they really want to do, want to achieve, and work towards that. And it just took meetings, as I said earlier, without departments, meetings among ourselves to realise how can we, temper what we want into something that's manageable and realistic. So, Michael, I think you would be better to answer this
I
than me.
suppose one of the things I would say is that one of the reasons I was involved in the process, June was the IMTAC representative on it, but the department couldn't even provide June with the communication support she needed to co-chair effectively. So, essentially, I came in to do that job. But also, I think at every stage we were being told by the department we need to manage our expectations. And for instance, at the start of our meetings were things like important issues like independent living. We're being given 15 minutes in a meeting to discuss, and then we move on. And I think it was these guys, in terms of the co-design group, pushing back on that constantly to say, no, these are important issues, they affect our lives, we need to discuss these properly. I think we went to Minister eventually to try and get that process. So the process became better as it went along, but certainly there didn't, I don't know what everybody else thought, but there didn't seem to be any understanding about disabled people's lives and the barriers that we face in terms of...
In communication, particular. Can I ask Amanda to say something?
The one thing I would say is there was constant, I know you've touched on it, constantly that pressure to get stuff done, and 15 minutes to do independent living. That's our lives we're talking about, and they're asking us to describe our lives and the lives of every other different disabled person in that 15 minutes. And we talked a lot about us guys being unpaid, but there was also people there from different companies and sectors that were paying big money for their staff to sit there, and to constantly have this time pressure because the minister needed this bit of paper or that bit of paper, or needed to be at this stage. And as we say, the disability strategy is a long time in coming. And even with this long time in coming, we're still being told at the end you're in a race. And then at the very end, you see nothing. And my fear at the minute is they turn around and say, let's start from the beginning again. And here we go on strategy number. We're into Roman numerals now. It's crazy. We need to recognise that time given by us and money spent by others, and not actually start this whole thing again. We need to pick up where we left off and see the strategy.
David?
Go ahead, Dermot.
Oh, Dermot.
I'll come back to Dermot. Dermot, and then I'll come to David.
Well, just to pick up just on what Amanda and June were saying, we would have to give her evidence and give her what we're going through, sometimes in the space of 15 minutes. But that's coming from the preconceived notions of what the non-disabled members were feeding into this, saying that this is what we want the goal to be. So they were a lot of time giving us big presentations of what they want to do and how they're going to do it. and we would only have 15 minutes to say, well, that's not right, this is our life's experience. So yes, we'd have these big meetings, but we would have to cram into a lot of space what we're doing because Department of Community Ministers and workers were coming in with these ideas what it should be and not what we feel it needs to be. So we didn't get a lot of time to do that, and as Amanda and June said, it put a lot of pressure on us, especially since we were doing this off our own back. We weren't getting paid on, but we felt we still had the pressure to deliver, not just on the people around the table today, but to deliver for everybody who is deaf and disabled across Northern Ireland, the North. So the 15-minute gap wasn't enough, and we needed to go on with an open mind, tell us, to ask us what we need, not to tell us this is what we're doing.
Yeah, when you have experts in front of you, you should be inclined to listen rather than speak, I have to say. Tony, I know you're indicating there. I'm going to go to David first, and then I'll come back to you. Go ahead.
I think there were a number of conflicting time constraints going on. The Minister was aware that her time was coming to an end more quickly than it might have been otherwise. And I think there was pressure from that direction. And one of the points I would make to that is, since the pressure was there, and since there was that time constraint, surely we can use this valuably and pick up and run from where we were at, as opposed to maybe losing everything that was done in that tight time. I think another aspect of a time constraint was that, as Dermot said, I think the officials didn't really understand where we were coming from, what the pressures are on us to try and get things together. And I think they had preconceived notions, as Dermot said, of non-disabled people and of officials presumably in their heads as they almost wanted a tick box exercise from us, for us to approve what they were proposing. And we weren't going down that route, and we adamantly refused to go down that route. The final thing I would make with regard to the process, the officials had no knowledge of disabled people's communication and information needs, none whatsoever. I mean, June had really big problems, as has been described by Michael and herself. Even I had problems getting the document in the right format. I do PDF, not various other ones, and to try and get that was quite tricky too. But they had no knowledge as to how we communicate, how we need to communicate, and what length of time some of that takes for us to do so. I use a voice system to type. It doesn't always work effectively. It can take time to go back over it 2 or 3 times to get it fixed. So that takes extra time that maybe wouldn't be there if I were writing. But it's getting the officials under. I think the officials need training if they're going to work with disabled people at that level as to how disabled people need certain things.
Thank you. Very, very important element for going forward for all departments and for all co-production design processes. Tony?
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add, it's important to recognise that the expert panel people, 3 of which were deaf and disabled people, they were paid £2,500 each for developing the original report. For my part, the money went to the Northwest Forum of People with Disabilities, my organisation, but we were paid for the expert panel was paid, but nobody, no deaf and disabled person on the co-design group were paid for their 2 years of work or for their expertise on the panel. Just to clarify that there was some financial. The other thing, just to say in respect of, since the 1999 Disability Rights Task Force recommendations, the Development of Equal Lives Disability Strategy, which was published in 2009, and then this now, the 3rd strategy, we haven't had a disability strategy in 21 years. Now, one of the things, one of the key asks in the strategy was legislative reform, highlighted there by Michael Lorimer. Now, the key asks for legislative reform have been asked for since 2009 by the Equality Commission. And we're now in 2024, and none of that legislative reform proposals, for example, has been passed. And indeed, there has been no equality or human rights legislation passed by the Northern Ireland Assembly since it came into existence. I think beyond the Autism Private Members Bill. That's not a great indictment of the Assembly since the Belfast Good Friday Agreement came into being. And that's why the Disability Co-Design Group and all of the members you see before you, David, June, Michael, Dermot, Amanda, all of these people sitting before you today are here today. This is what we want. So we've been hanging about now for over 2 decades for a disability strategy that we've all worked on, that we've all put blood, sweat and tears in. And we're asking today, where is it? Are we going to get one? What are the outcomes going to be? Yes, there have been positives. The fact that deaf and disabled people have been directly engaged with by the department, they attempted co-production and co-design. The fact that they got an expert panel together made up of deaf and disabled people, including a DPO, those are positives. So don't want to be totally negative, but at the end of the day, we're still sitting here with zero outcome.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So listen, I'm conscious now time is marching on us, but I've Ciara and Brian there.
Okay, that's more comment and then I've just one question. So thanks each and every one of you, not only the panel here in front of us and the organisations represented, but also individuals in the gallery. I really appreciate and you're taking your time out of your busy life schedules to come along here today to update us on what has been, as mentioned, and like my colleague here, let down and dumped. And that's 2 key things. And I'm conscious not only for yourselves, but we've heard something similar with regards to the anti-poverty strategy and others. Co-design, really a lot of work needs to be done on that. And I think what we've heard today, there's a couple of key lessons need to be looked at. So along the request of urgently bringing back yourselves, the co-design group and the expert panel, that's something the department needs to do. I think likewise the department, and to support other departments in moving forward, an evaluation of your experiences through that process over the last year back in 21-22 and how you felt. What was the good? Because as I'm assuming there was good aspects, but there was also not so good, and we need to learn from that, and all other departments need to learn from that. And I think hearing your voices would be critical for all other departments and moving forward. So that would be another key area. An area that was mentioned, and obviously the research report as well. What was the research carried out and what was the impact of it? That's another key ask that we need to ask the department. But you mentioned, and I think, and I'm very supportive of all of your 8 key asks in your paper. One of them that you highlighted was the dearth of data, and that's another consistent message I'm hearing across departments. Can you throw some light on that and what needs to happen around the dearth of data that currently exists?
Thank you, Ciara. Tony?
There is the dearth of data that currently exists is huge, and it's on every aspect of our lives, whether it's independent living, whether it's on social security, whether it's on employment or whatever. There is insufficient data in terms of the impacts of disabled people on social policy. And it was also highlighted. It was also highlighted in the concluding observations by the UNCRPD committee, and it's also been highlighted by both the Equality and Human Rights Commissions, who I know were also in the gallery here today. It is a huge issue. Article 31, of the Convention, the requirement to collect data and to inform policy. There's literally no data. I know from doing the research, assisting with the research for the independent mechanism when they were giving their report to the UNCRPD, we were depending on UK-wide data or oral communications with deaf and disabled people, because the impact of policies just wasn't there in terms of the impact on, for example, like accessible housing, transport. They're just the departments are not prioritizing data sufficiently and it's not just for disabled people, but it crosses right across all of the inclusion strategies. Data collection is not a priority of the government.
Can I add to that? The irony I find is that when you try and prove a case with departments, they ask you for data, and yet they don't go and get the data. Yeah. So we need data in order to prove cases, both for ourselves and for the government, for yourselves. And I mean, an example is Encompass, which I'm sure everybody's heard of by now. And the question has been asked, will it provide data? And we still haven't got an answer.
No, thank you for Tony, and I think that's another key area as well, because how can you develop key actions and then measure those actions and outcomes if we don't have a baseline and we don't have that data? And you would expect that should have been a first protocol in the start of any process for the strategy. So just thank you all, each and every one of you. You've really given an insight into the process you have been through. It's totally unacceptable, and I'm very much supportive of ensuring that we can drive forward and get that delivered, but it needs to be in partnership with and full involvement with yourselves, because you are the experts, so thank you.
I add something else. There is a best practice here within the Assembly departments. The Department of Health established a regional disabled people's health and social care forum a couple of years back. We were all part of that, of establishing it, and we are all part of being on it. So the Department of Health actually have a disability strategy running as a regional disabled people's health and social care forum. And we are listened to, and we are involved, and we try and move all of that ahead. So, the example is there. It's not as if it's not done. It is done. But it needs the right sort of attitude, the right frame of mind to take it forward.
And the right focus and resource to keep that going. And it is, as I say, itself a resource. Brian, go ahead, please.
Great. Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for your attendance and your presentation so far. I'm learning from all of what you're saying. Two questions. Tony's partly answered it, but if you could just set out for me what has happened previously in terms of legislation. David, you're referring to changes which I think followed on from the Disability Discrimination Act, maybe 1995. Then there was the Equality Act 2010 didn't apply in Northern Ireland, is that right? But you said it was 21 years since something previously, so I'm trying to work out, was there something then 2003? But anyway, if Tony maybe could just set out the main landmarks which have applied or not applied in Northern Ireland.
Sorry.
If I can answer the DDA bit, sorry, Tony. Yeah. The DDA was introduced in 1995. Yeah. It was introduced after, I think, 17 attempts from around the 1970s by disabled people to try and get anti-discriminatory legislation. It was introduced in 1994 as a private member's bill. It fell at that because it ran out of time. There were issues around the government conspiring to have it run out of time, which was then discovered by the press. So when it was coming up the next year, 95, the Conservative government at the time decided to write their own. Initially that was all around employment, nothing else. Disabled people campaigned and fought and to have that broadened out to come close to their bill. And we therefore got a range of items within that range of changes. Transport, services, buildings, everything. But they all came in as a rolling programme, so they came in over time. They didn't come all in at the same time. Transport, for example, was 2017. So that was the general anti-discrimination bill against disabled people. Because it wasn't absolutely complete, it didn't, for example, include people with MS. There were problems with people with MS because the description of somebody who's disabled is someone with a long-term condition. MS can go into recession. And so that was causing problems with people with MS being recognised under it, and people with AIDS and people with cancer. So those three groups were included in 2010. The bill was brought up. It was a bill in Northern Ireland, not an act. and it was the Disciplinary Discrimination Act in GB, and it was the Disciplinary Discrimination Bill 2010 over here. I'll let Tony follow on from that.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Tony, please.
Just to advise, the legislative reform that the Equality Commission is proposing is one to harmonise it with the requirements under Article 5 of Equality and Non-Discrimination of the UNCRPD, but also to ensure parity of equality with Northern Ireland and Great Britain. The Equality Act, for example, doesn't provide for indirect. The Equality Act provides for indirect discrimination, for example, but it doesn't provide for indirect discrimination here. So a policy can be enacted that indirectly discriminates against disabled people, and disabled people, for example, here in Northern Ireland don't have any recourse to the law. The Equality Commission's proposals are set out on its website, but I know also that I think Paul Noonan is there from the Equality Commission, and Paul can certainly, or a representative of the Equality Commission, can give you access to the details of those proposals rather than going into it now. Just to clarify, I referred to the Disability Rights Task Force recommendations in 1999, which coming from that then led to the PSI working group in 2003, which went on for, I think, about 3 to 4 years. And then it developed the Equal Lives strategy. That wasn't to do with legislation, that was to do with the development of a wider disability strategy. And as the co-chair, June Best, has already made clear, that was never implemented and never followed through, despite a commitment from both the First Minister and Deputy First Minister to us that it would be implemented. We met with them both. So that was what I was referring to there. It was about the disability strategy. But the legislation is, our equality legislation is, it doesn't come close to matching the requirements of the Equality Act. And indeed, the Equality Act itself doesn't even meet the requirements of Article 5, Equality and Non-Discrimination, of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So our legislation, our equality legislation, is in a fairly poor state at the present time.
Can I just...
So, well, sorry, is this on this, Michael?
It is on this specifically. It sort of feeds into the wider issues we have here. You know, it's been 14 years since the Equality Act came into place. You know, we've been living for 14 years with this disparity between GB and Northern Ireland. Tony talked about Disability Rights Task Force. One of the recommendations was to extend the rights under Part 4 of the DDA to the use of transport. We had to fight tooth and nail to get that in. It was brought in GB in 2006. I think eventually we got it here in 2010-11. And it just seems constantly we have to fight to keep up. And it's that lack of commitment from government. It really demonstrates, nothing demonstrates the lack of commitment. We were told whenever the co-design process talked on legislative reform, we may be able to tackle some elements of the disparity. We might be able to do 1 or 2 things, but we can't do it all. And we're saying, after 14 years, why are we still talking about skirting around the edges? Where is the real commitment here towards disabled people and our rights?
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Well, without going into a long answer, because I'm aware of the time pressures, again, David, you touched on the work of the Department of Health with the forum they have set up. This sits with DF's Department for Communities, but I'm slightly surprised it's not with TEO, because it would be a cross-cutting strategy affecting every department, and your paper sets out all the various sectors. I think every department effectively, and as I'm sure they currently do, try to address disability equality matters. So my question is, are you involved with all those departments? Or, I know you came together specifically for this job of work, but I'm sure you have engagement with departments, or do you?
Are we engaged?
Yes.
We do. We try to. We obviously can't go to every single one the same way, but we were working through the Department for Communities to try and get that started. the idea was to have a disability forum with each department. That's why I'm highlighting the health one, because it's up and running, because we work with health to do that. And MTAC would be a similar thing with the Department for Infrastructure. So other departments are lacking that, but the lead has to come from communities, because that's what their responsibility is, and that's why we're pushing to get this through. The idea is that we set up a regional disabled people's forum with the Department of Communities, and that branches off and sets up others amongst the other departments. As I said, 2 of them are already set up, so it's the remaining departments need to look at.
Okay, thank you.
Tony's indicating then. Tony, go ahead then. Finally.
The disability employment and disability working group that was meant to be the disability employment stakeholder forum, which is the Department for Communities, that was meant to have disabled people involved in it and done in a co-production and done in a co-design way. The Northwest Forum of People with Disabilities co-chaired it for 6 years, but it was really the only DPO involved, and it only had one representative. There has been no disabled people involved in the development of the disability and employment strategy, and it was one of the issues we raised with the UN committee in August. So we're looking for the Department for Communities to work more closely with, for example, disabled people in the area of employment. And in particular, we would like to see the greater involvement of people with learning disabilities and people with mental health issues within these co-design processes and working groups within the departments as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Well, listen, that's been a very useful session in the sense of clarifying, and I think really, even though we had the briefing, I think hearing it, just the lack of engagement with you is really something that's, you know, just in terms of professionalism and to glean the work that you have put in and to make sure that that's part of the strategy is hugely important. The committee, I think, will be looking at a number of follow-up actions here that will address some of the issues you have raised, and we will want to keep an eye on this issue, and I think that'll be something that we'll. But for now, we deeply appreciate your time, I have to say, and we're very conscious of how difficult it can be to even just turn up here and give this evidence, and I do deeply appreciate the fact that you have come here today and that we have had people with real expertise setting that out. The department have also had the benefit of that expertise, and I want to see that coming through into the strategy. So I think the committee will as well. So thank you, June. Thank you everyone for your contribution, and we will pick up on the various elements that have been raised as part of the briefing.
Can I just thank you on behalf of us all for giving us the time to listen and to listen to our passion. It's our lives, but something, if you can remember, it's nothing about us without us, and that makes all the difference. If you would take that on board, please, when we're talking about other departments as well.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And all the best, our more everyone. Okay, thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Tony.
Okay. Clerk. Is there anything more specific on any of these, or just covered in the memo?
They're covered in that if you go through it. It's just that's the only place we can upload them to the system.
Yeah.
So if you just work through them, use the page numbers to direct
So,
people.
in terms of table, whatever.
I'm trying to get a harness on a dog here.
So I've covered a lot of these. Well, I'm going into the SL1s, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Registered
Just get
grants.
this on and sort myself out.
Are you missing?
I'm missing all of the rest of after that.
You have mine.
Right, so where are we at? Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
You want to get up?
Okay, thank you.
Ellie, go ahead then.
I was just going to ask, could we get a present? I know we're going to have our away day next week, but one of the things maybe we could put on the list for the away day is a presentation from the department specifically on the disability strategy, what's happening with it. I know I've been asking questions about the strategy and where it is, and I just think it's time that we got them on record.
Yeah, I think we also need to write to the department and say that the committee believe that the members who contributed should urgently see sight of the draft, and they should see it before any draft is released anywhere else. Are members content?
I think they need to reconvene. They need to reconvene the expert panel and the co-design group to update them on the strategy and the research.
The last action from the committee, which has been sent to the department, was requesting a briefing on in confidence. A confidential briefing came out of the last meeting on all of the social strategies. Is this a letter in addition to that, or a request in addition to that?
That as a committee, we need to know what the strategies, what's happening with them, but there's a lot of responses to what we've heard today may after that need to be on the record. Yeah, so if we get the confidential briefing, and then we'll need to go public, I think, with responses to some of the things that we've heard, because I'm very concerned. I declare an interest as a person with the hearing loss, as a person who's a member of the disability community. I'm disgusted at the fact that we don't have a strategy. We can hear from the department what they're planning to do, but I think we need to answer disabled persons' issues publicly after that. We can make that very clear to the department that we have the two-pronged approach with them, that confidentially they can certainly share with us that detail, but some of the issues raised here about disabled people feeling abandoned is something I think we need to do more in public.
And I think there's important, sorry Melissa, I think there's important evidence there as well for all departments really around the needs to consider how you engage with that sector to get the most out of their expertise and so I'm not sure how we might do that, but maybe Claire, can you suggest how we might draw all the committee's attention just to the need to pick up on what we've heard?
I understand that in the Executive Office Department there is a working group within NICS of disabled employees, and there is a resource there.
Internal.
It's only internal.
That's what I was trying to pick up at the end, because we could publish, or our department could publish a strategy, or the communities department, but it's all other departments, all of the action plans, all the action points flowing from that are relevant to every other department. So I think it is relevant to ask each department, or each committee, how they're engaging with that sector.
Well, specifically
What
I'm suggesting is that what I'm really suggesting, and members can make their own decision, what I'm saying is that in terms of the very poor, or in terms of the learning from how you engage and how you facilitate that communication, that we flag that to other, our role is to scrutinise the communities, but I think if we could flag it, it would be useful information for anyone.
Can I just clarify? We're going about this the wrong way here. The Department for Communities is tasked with providing the disability strategy for the executive.
Yeah.
It is not a one-stop shop just for communities. This brings in health, and that's why they've already said that all of the other departments took part in that discussion. Yeah. If communities are going to play the game, but they're only going to do it within their own department, then what is the point in having a disability strategy? Every department has their own internal NICS disability programme that they have to do for their own staff. We're not asking this is a public joined together one.
Yeah. The strategy hasn't been published yet.
Yeah.
No, and I think that's a question, that's what we should be asking. That we should see that, and just as they had expressed that view as well too, that they would have been entitled to, if anything, being the first stop shop in relation to the strategy and that as well, should they have needed feedback and that on it, and that I go back against this recommendation that I was making earlier on, that is in fact what we should be doing, as asking for that publication and to see it.
So writing to the Minister, asking for the advisory group to have sight of the draft strategy that they input to, and that the committee also have sight of that draft strategy with a confidential briefing.
Absolutely. That if that's the way it has to be for the Minister, that absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's first stop shop, and from there we move on it.
And maybe an update on the research that they commissioned. The expert panel group and the co-design group don't even know what research was commissioned. I just find that. But another thing is, I think what they need to consider, and I would put in a request, they need to evaluate the individual's participation on it. And that can be a simple evaluation form sent out, but they need to evaluate the process so they can learn from the process. And I know co-design, there's no point we all say co-design if we're doing a strategy, a disability strategy, and people feel a process, the department hasn't got a process right to even cater for their basic needs. That's really extreme, where you're working with people to develop a strategy and you couldn't even cater for their needs. You couldn't even take into consideration the process and agree a process from the start. So there needs to be an evaluation, and that's not to take away that there's probably some really good stuff that did happen during that process, but it needs to be, we need to continuously learn. So if there's no evaluation of the process, how are they going to continue to learn? Because I'm just conscious of the other strategies, because when the neighbour renewal partnerships came here, they were saying the same thing regarding the co-design process. They didn't feel at the start that it felt like a co-design process, and it was constantly challenging. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned, and I think there could be valuable lessons, and the department could take the lead on that for all our departments.
Okay. Members content then with those actions?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, members, moving on then to item table paper SL1, universal credit.
Chair, just before we move on, I know today we were due to have a briefing from NICFA, and they haven't been able to come today. Did they give the reason why?
I understand they had committed the date for an all-party group event.
I think I'd just like to put it on record that to turn down a statutory committee for an all-party group, I don't know whether after, obviously the Assembly's been up and down, but all-party group work, while it is very useful, shouldn't take precedence over a statutory committee. We will be going forward and trying to fight on behalf of and with the Minister and to help the Department about the community and voluntary sector, but they're not coming here. Have they asked for an alternate date?
Not at this point.
They've asked that they brief again at some stage, but obviously
We
that's
haven't
something for the
provided
committee
any
to
dates.
consider.
Yeah, until after the planning day.
I'd just like to note my disappointment as well, and I would concur with Kelly. It's quite disappointing that they could not present here today.
Now, just declare an interest as a charity trustee. In terms of, can I just clarify when the invite went out to them? How much notice were they given?
I would need to double check that. So on the forward work programme, they've been listed for a number of weeks with a TBC to be confirmed, but I can double check on the date and email that round members. We usually give all attendees at least 2 weeks advance notice.
I think my annoyance comes from the fact that the all-party group is at 1 o'clock, which is after this committee.
Is it was it not 12? 12 o'clock?
No, it's rescheduled. It's not starting now, it's 41.
Yeah, so they could have been here.
I've seen one mentioned as well as quarter to one.
No, it's tea and coffee, quarter to 1, and it starts at 1.
Starts at 1 now.
I'm here in the building.
In the dining hall.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, thank you for that. So I'm going then through to table SL1 Universal Credit Administrative Earnings Threshold Amendment Regulations NI 2024 on page 116. The purpose of this proposed rule is to raise the Universal Credit Administrative Earnings threshold to 18 hours per week at the national living wage for single claimants, or for couples a total of 29 hours between them at the national living wage from 13th of May 2024. This is equivalent to £892 for single claimants and £1,437 for couples. So do members have any comments, or are they content for the department to proceed to make this rule?
Great.
Content, members, thank you. Item 7 then, which is page 125, SR 2024-99, the Registered Rents Increase Order, NI 2024. This is at SL1 stage, members. We had decided that we were content for the department to proceed to make the rule, but we did write to ask how many people would be affected by the rent increase and how many affected by it are in receipt of housing benefit. The department's response is at page 77 of your table papers, and it states 334 tenancies are affected by the rent increase, and of these, 126 tenancies are in receipt of housing benefit. The examiner's most recent report, the 11th report, was published on Tuesday and is attached in your table papers at page 40 and includes Rule 2024/19. So do members have any objection to the rule, or any objection to this rule, members?
No.
No. Thank you. So therefore I put the question that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2024/99. The Registered Rents Increase Order NI 2024 and has no objection to the rule. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you, members. Agenda item 8 then, members, is correspondence. So I refer members to the correspondence memo at page 131 of your meeting packs and to the tabled correspondence memo at page 33 of the table pack. Do members have any comments in relation to any of the items of correspondence in either of those two memos?
I would just declare that this as well as for the chairman of NESCO, which is a registered charity.
Any other comments, members?
Sorry, can I just ask, the public consultation, just to clarify, it's been a while, does this committee give a response back to the public consultation that DFC are doing on the threshold for small charities?
Committee can submit a response.
Talk about it next week, sure, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so members therefore content to action the correspondence is outlined in the memos. Yep. Thank you. Agenda item 9 then, members, forward work programme, which is in your table pack at page 3. You'll find the clerk's memo there at page 3, in relation to next week's planning session. There's also a draft agenda at page 9, along with details for the off-site meeting, as an off-site from here in Dungannon, and the committee planning session for next week for your review and comment. So you'll find the updated forward work programme document in the table pack at page 22. We obviously have our strategic planning session next week, when the focus will be on agreeing and prioritising a work programme beyond the meeting on 16th of May, when we will have several briefings in relation to the forthcoming defective premises bill. So, members, we're asking everyone to identify your top 5 priorities for the committee planning session to the clerk by noon by next Tuesday by email. So that will allow us to form a kind of a matrix of where the combined committee's interests are and how we manage to schedule all of that. Do you want to say anything about that, Clerk, at this point?
Yeah, no, what I'll do is collate all of that and then update a presentation, and we can then have a process of assigning dots to try and weight each and come up with our top list.
Yeah, it's clearly something we're going to have to be very conscious of throughout, given the scope and scale and complexity and pressing nature of a range of issues across this department. We are going to have to be very, very focused and strategic as to how we schedule these things in and to allow time to get the information. So that'll be a very useful session, and I'm looking forward to welcoming you all to Dungannon for that.
Just to clarify, I mean, in terms of like the long list we're working off, it's any of the matters really under the remit of this committee, and any of the presentations that we've received, we just pick what we consider to be our top 5 priority areas.
Yes.
But all that'll be fed into then the planning session next week, and the decisions will be made then at the meeting.
Well, flowing from yes. So that part of that discussion will form part of the decision. Then we'll come back then with a kind of a draft plan for members to have a look at.
Okay.
Just remind me, do we have the timeline of what legislation the Minister is moving forward throughout this mandate? We really need that.
The clerk's memo alludes to where they've been referenced as a specific timeline we don't have in writing.
We would possibly request that, just a potential timeline. I know we have it for justice, and it's quite useful for a strategic planning day then, and set in the context of what the volume of legislative work that we're going to be involved in and where the pressure points are going to be, to coincide with then what other key areas.
I've asked for it a couple of times in writing, confirmation of it. Committee has already asked for it, and what we've been given is a sense of what we understand is coming pre-summer, and one bill in autumn, and that's it.
We have been asking nearly from the outset, really.
Yeah, it would also be really useful.
Push again maybe. Let's just ask again, given that we have a planning session next week.
It would also be really useful if there was any indication of budgetary pressures or what asks were put in for a funding pot from Department of Finance when setting the budget, just so that we can get a bit of an idea of, we know how much it costs to deliver the statutory stuff, where are we actually going to sit with that, given that all departments are facing so much pressure. So it would be good to understand the lay of the land when it comes to that.
I think we have a request in for a briefing on the budget.
25,
Okay, so
Mine's is more, it's about defective premises, but I can do it under AOB if you want.
Okay, I'm moving just into AOB now, so any other business members? Kelly, go ahead.
I know that the defective premises, the Minister's taken that forward, thank goodness for that. I've received communication from a person that I can certainly share with the clerk if the committee's in agreement. They have said that a replication of the English law will not actually help the Victoria Square residents or owners. Something about under the English defective premises law section 1356, I think it is, but I can send the reference over, that any person that's been involved in a legal case that has been struck out, as they have been because the law here didn't extend to their length, their time periods, it would prevent a future claim then being taken forward. And I just wouldn't mind, I know it's accelerated passage, but I don't know if the department are looking at that aspect of it to ensure that whatever they are bringing in, because we haven't seen it yet, will enable those Victoria Square owners to be able to go again. Yeah.
Is he clear then?
I can email the copy around everyone if you want.
So if Kelly shares the correspondence, we can include it for the pack for the 16th.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
received
have
that as well
permission.
this morning. I'm not sure if it was sent to everybody or not. So.
Could well be. It was the very early hours of this
Aye,
morning.
indeed.
Well, then we've all received it, so but I'll send it to yourself because it does have a reference in it about the reference in the legislation. I don't have permission from the person to share their email, but I can ask them.
We can redact that.
Thank you. Any other business members? No, thank you. So I'm moving on to item 11, date, time and location of the next meeting. Can I just say before I confirm that, I want to thank the clerk and the entire team here for the work they have done on all of these sessions. And today's, I think, was particularly useful. But there's a lot of work goes into all of that, and I think they've really hit the ground very quickly to provide us with those sessions. And I just want to thank the clerk and all of our staff for that. So members, our next meeting will be at 10 a.m. on Thursday 9th of May in Four Steps Women's Centre in Dungannon, and the meeting is now adjourned. And it will take a minute or two to go into closed and to end the broadcasting.
For convenience, can we get the address and directions just for the First Steps Women's Centre?